Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. I hope everybody's having a good week. The tropics are already doing things and I don't like it because it's July. I don't want to do this. I don't. We have months to go. Okay, I just had to get that out. All right, anyways, thank you to everybody who's interacted with the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads and everything else pages because you guys are awesome. I love you. I cannot thank you enough for helping make this podcast successful. So, really, I always say it, but thank you so much. If you guys have a second, I would really appreciate a review on Apple. It really just kind of helps get the podcast out. It makes me more visible to everybody else, and then they see how awesome this podcast is, like you guys already know, and so I really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe on both Apple and Spotify. Don't forget to like and share the Facebook pages and groups with all your friends as well, guys. I really appreciate it. Share those memes. I love seeing the pictures and the memes. It's always hilarious because, like, it's Florida. You can just, there's everything to make fun of. So keep doing it. I love it. And I also love seeing the videos randomly that you guys also post every now and then. Those are great. Also want to give a shout out to a bunch of awesome people that I've met through this podcast. You guys are simply amazing. You guys have become some of my really good friends that I talk to daily, and I am grateful for that. So I didn't know really what this podcast would be when it started, and it's evolving to something awesome. Also, if you've not checked out Unfiltered Studios, please do so. That is a great group of people. I am a part of Unfiltered Studios. I've gotten to be guest on a couple podcasts, and I'm going to have some of them on my podcast. You have either gotten to hear some of them at this point, or you're going to get to hear some more. I'm not sure where this one is going to land in my succession of episodes coming up, but they're an amazing group of people. Unfiltered Studios is home to some really creative people. You can hear anything from sports, movie, trivia, history, self-help, hypnosis. I didn't know anything about hypnosis. And then I started talking to Cindy, and she's amazing. You've got to check out her hypnosis podcast on Unfiltered. If you haven't checked it out, you need to check it out. You just find some amazing stuff there, especially if you're looking for something new to listen to. So, back to Florida. Florida is full of a lot of things. Florida's full of a lot of things that'll kill you. Florida's full of a lot of things that won't kill you. But Florida's also full of a lot of really talented people, from actors to musicians to writers. Ernest Hemingway is probably the first writer that comes to mind. Also, Marjorie Kennan Rawlings and Jack Kerouac actually all lived and or died in the Sunshine State. For those of you who are questioning me on Jack Kerouac, yes, he actually died in the Sunshine State. He actually died in St. Pete. And these were all very talented people. But today I'm going to talk about someone who I consider just as talented, maybe not as well known, but one of my favorite authors who's actually not necessarily born in Florida, but truly adopted Florida. And I'm going to introduce you to the man who wrote a true Florida man character. And I have just fallen in love with his books, and I went back and forth about introducing you to these books. Because they're not for everybody, but I'm doing it. So the author I'm going to introduce you to is Tim Dorsey. And he wrote an entire series on a character, and I just couldn't wait to tell you about it. So let's talk about the author, and then we're going to talk about the character. So Tim Dorsey was born on January 25th, 1961 in Carmel, Indiana. But he was moved to Florida by the age of 1. So we're going to say he was pretty much Floridian. He moved to Florida by his mom, and he pretty much grew up here. He grew up in Riviera Beach in Palm Beach County, which is just north of West Palm. And I'm pretty sure Riviera Beach wasn't what it was when he was growing up. I mean, it's a lot today. I'm sure it was a lot better when he was growing up. Like, it is just a lot today. If you've been down there or even driven through it, you know what I'm talking about. Dorsey, though, left Florida. He did attend Auburn University and actually graduated from there with a degree in transportation. He stayed in Alabama. He lived in Montgomery before moving back to the Sunshine State and deciding that Tampa was his home. Can't say I blame him. Tampa's a nice area. He actually became a reporter for the Tampa Tribune in 1987. and he stayed there for a while. He actually worked for the paper from 1987 to 1999 when he resigned to become a full-time writer. I'm kind of jealous of him. He would actually work for various jobs as a political reporter, a correspondent in the Tribune's Tallahassee bureau, a copy desk editor, and finally as a night metro editor and news coordinator. So he knew what he was doing in the writing field. Dorsey actually lived in Tampa with his two daughters. He was a huge fan of the Tampa Rays, but he always considered himself a Red Sox fan at heart. And while living in Tampa, that's where he began to write his most well-known Florida man character ever. And this is one of my favorite literary characters ever, Sarge A. Storms. And like I said, these books are not for everybody, but he wrote a lot of these books. Like, it is an entire series. Dorsey began to write this series about Sarge A. Storms, and it was one of these series that it took me a minute to get into it, but once I got into it, you got into it. Because Storms is really like a vigilante anti-hero, like Deadpool. But almost worse than Deadpool, if somehow that happens. Because Storms just kind of like goes on sprees across Florida, and he just takes out any low-life criminal that he feels like he enforces this morale code, and he just does it to whoever, and he just travels across the state. He meets some really interesting people, and he has some really wild adventures in these books. I love it. Now, Sarge is shown to have some mental illnesses that made him very obsessive, psychopathic tendencies, schizophrenic, and very, very homicidal. Very homicidal. And all this happens as he deals with people in his daily life, of course, traversing back and forth through Florida. He is the main character, but thanks to his strong sense of justice and morals, and his idea that some things are very inherently right and very inherently wrong, he is very entertaining, to say the least. He's actually really intelligent, and he usually comes up with some super inventive ways to condemn the villains of his story to death. Very inventive ways, let me tell you. The first book I actually picked up and read, I had to read one of the scenes twice because I was like, wait, what? What did he just do? It's very, like, Dorsey is an amazing writer for this reason. Like, it's very captivating. But of course, Sarge is not alone. He actually usually has a wingman on his adventures, and that's Coleman. Coleman is just about as messed up as Sarge. Coleman is an alcoholic drug user who pretty much goes to whatever lengths he can to maintain that fix, and he also tends to get in quite a bit of trouble doing so. Now, Dorsey has actually written 26 books about Sarge A. Storms and his adventures, starting back in 1999, and his last one was February of 2023. The books have insanely wild neon covers, and even better names that pretty much pay homage to all the different things in Florida. Now, my first book that I picked up, which actually is the first book, is Florida Roadkill. And pretty much the name says it all. And the last book is The Maltese Iguana. But you're going to find books like the names of The Pope of Palm Beach, Triggerfish Twist, When Elves Attack. And that's just a couple of the names. There's so many more. And the cool thing about the books is that Dorsey wrote the first 6 out of order. So he just kind of wrote the first one, and then he decided, like, oh no, like, I got to go back and fix some things. I actually read Florida Roadkill first. That's the first one I picked up because the name, like, I was walking through a bookstore and, like, the cover struck me. I'm actually sitting here next to it, and it's a bright green book with a flamingo, one of those plastic flamingos, run over with, like, a tire tread. And it's just, like, you just look at it and you go, I don't know what that is, but I feel that I need to read this. I need to read it. And that's kind of how I picked it up. But Florida Roadkill is actually the second book in the series. But the first book that he actually wrote. So, yeah, he kind of went back and fixed it. You know, it's really strange. But if you want to read the actual, like, series the way it is, you can find it actually on Wikipedia, of all places, to figure out the order of the books to read. But the thing that I love about these books is that Dorsey uses actual places in Florida when he's talking about these characters and the places that they're going and even the events that are happening. And I think that's really cool because, like, he would be talking about places in Tampa, and I'd be like, man, I was living in Tampa the first time I got the book, and I'm like thinking, man, that's like 5 miles away. Like, I live there. Or, dude, I've driven over there. Like, he talks about the Keys a lot, and it's like, I know exactly where that is. Like, I was there 2 years ago. And I think that's what's really cool, especially for people in Florida, is that you get drawn in and you know these places. Like, you can visually see what he's talking about, and I love it. So it's kind of cool because you can see these places as Serge is making his way throughout the state. And like I said, I lived in Tampa, so as he's talking about it and Serge is driving around the city, I'm picturing, like, oh, I've driven down that road, or I've seen that building, or oh my God, the traffic he probably sat in. And you can actually picture yourself in these books, and that was what was really cool about it. And I like that he does put the real Florida places and things in the book, and the details were so good. And he makes every character different, so much so that you're either going to love him or you're going to hate him. And of course, Dorsey also wrote 3 short stories, kind of essays that talk about Serge and his adventures. But the really cool thing about Dorsey is that he was such a great author. He loved meeting his fans and regularly did do meet and greets with his guests. He was known to go all over the state, and he did. I mean, he would do like back-to-back meet and greets. He regularly updated the website and his tour schedule, and he would interact with fans online. And he really did continue to write, and he was an online presence through COVID. And like, he really got into his characters. He really enjoyed the fact that the fans wanted to be like, they were interested in his work. And I think that's really cool as an author, that, you know, he appreciated the fact that someone liked his work and wanted to talk to the people, not just sign a book and go on. So that was really cool. He was such a great guy in that aspect, that he cared about the people in Florida and even outside of Florida that wanted to read his work. And I actually have the book sitting next to me, Florida Roadkill, the very first one that I read. And I'm going to read the back of it to you so you kind of get an idea of kind of what this book would be about. And you'll understand kind of why I say it's not for everybody. So the very back, like, you know how you flip a book over and you read the back of it to see if you want to, like, read it? And this is what I read the very first time I picked this book up. Sunshine Trivia buff Serge A. Storms loves eliminating jerks and pests. His drug-addled partner Coleman loves cartoons. Hot stripper Sharon Rhodes loves cocaine, especially when purchased with rich dead men's money. So far, you have 3 very interesting characters there. You don't know much about them, except one probably kills people, one likes drugs, and one's a whore. We're off to a great start, right? Okay. On the other hand, there's Sean and David, who love fishing and are kind to animals, and who are about to cross paths with a suitcase filled with $5 million in stolen insurance money. Serge wants the suitcase. Sharon wants the suitcase. Coleman wants more drugs and probably the suitcase. In the meantime, there's a murder by gun, a space shuttle, a Barbie doll, and Levi's 501s. Because why not? Levi's are the best jeans. We all know that. In other words, welcome to Tim Dorsey's Florida, where nobody gets out unscathed and untanned. And so that was really cool. When I read that, I looked at it and I'm like, I have to read this book. I flipped through it, and it's not a big book. I mean, the Florida Roadkill I read is under 300 pages, depending on the kind of print you got. And so, you know, I had to look for it, and I flipped through it, and I was still kind of like, am I really gonna read this? And then, you open to like the first page and you kind of glance at it again. And even in the prologue, the first few sentences, this is what I read. Florida even looks good collapsing. From Loggerhead Key to Amelia Island to the Floribama Lounge. The land of flowers has natives caught in seductive headlights. So in those 2 sentences, he has hit every corner of the state of Florida. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, all right. So now we know he's talking about all the state. And then, like I said, he actually talks about, things that actually happened. And he talks about places that you might have seen. So, continue reading on. I was like, yeah, all right. But, like, is this guy really going to talk about Florida? And then you read a sentence that says, the 1960s Orbit Motel is a 2-story box around with a swimming pool. Its east side faced Cocoa Beach and the Atlantic Ocean. Its sign on Highway A1A, illuminated globe, circled mechanical. And they were just waiting on the space shuttle launch. Okay, well, at least he knows what happens in Cocoa. And then you keep reading, and it's talking about, the Apollo 13, and you're like, all right, so this guy really might know about Florida. And the more that I kind of read the prologue, I realized that as I started to stand there, Matthew had to come get me because he's like, you've been reading and you've read 2 chapters in this book. Why don't you just go ahead and buy it at this point? And so I ended up buying the book, and I think by the time, that I'd gotten home that day, I'd probably read more than half the book. Because as I read it, the man starts talking about, areas north of Tampa Bay and Pine Island and, like I said, places that I had been to. And it was just so cool to find an author that seems like he had been there. And then I started researching and found out that he had, in fact, written some 20-something books. Actually, at that time, it was probably like 23 or 24. And, I couldn't wait to read more. And I ended up reading like 4 of them in like 2 weeks, because Tim Dorsey is such a great author, and he really, really gets you into, Serge A. Storms. He's such a captivating character. I love it. And Dorsey really was such a great person to interact with. Unfortunately, though, Dorsey did sadly pass away in his Florida Keys home recently, on November 26, 2023. A lot of media outlets actually covered his passing, as Dorothy did have a large cult following. And he really, so does his character. Serge A. Storms is, one of the coolest characters ever. Dorsey was known to be a private person, but he really gave his fans everything at every event. So it's easy to say that he will be missed, and so will his character. I think that today we have a Florida man story in honor of Tim Dorsey. I am going to tell you one, even though if you read his books, you'll see that every Florida man story is a little bit of Sarge. And it really comes straight from Jacksonville, because it's Jacksonville. Florida man tried to buy beer while carrying an alligator. Boy, that's Florida man for you. A man entered a store and tried to buy a case of beer while holding an alligator. And in true Florida tradition, he was allowed to buy the beer. And for some reason, they also allowed him to keep the alligator. I mean, I don't know that I would walk up to him and be like, yeah, hey man, give me the alligator. I mean, I'm not. I'm certainly not. And I did see the picture of this Florida man story. I mean, it was like only a 3-foot alligator. It's still gonna hurt when it bites you, and then them little claws. But yeah, this guy walked into a convenience store holding this little alligator and bought the beer and walked out holding his alligator. I mean, we don't know, guys. Maybe it was his emotional support animal. We don't know. It is Florida. That could be his emotional support animal. But I would have at least left it in my car, maybe, or outside or something. I don't know. I don't think I would have walked in with it to get the beer. All right, guys. Hopefully, if you are a fellow avid reader like me, I've turned you on to some new books. Like I said, they're not for everybody. They're definitely rated R kind of books. So if you're not into that, there are other Florida authors you can check out that I'll talk about at a later podcast. But if you are into some crazy books, definitely check out Tim Dorsey and any of his books on Sarge A. Storms. I just love it. I think I've still got 2 or 3 that I haven't read in the series, and I know they're sitting on my bookshelf, and now I'm like, I'm probably going to start one tonight. But thank you for listening today. Don't forget to check out Unfiltered Studios. Everybody on there is great, especially if you're looking for something new. I know this wasn't a super long episode, but it was definitely one that meant something to me as a reader. This is something that I love, and I wanted to share it with you guys, and I wanted to introduce it to you guys, because I feel that he pretty much gives off that Florida feeling, and Serge definitely gives off that Florida man vibe, so had to talk about it at least once, guys. Keep an eye on the tropics. It's active and it's out there. Don't forget to drink your water. Try to stay cool. It's hot. Summer's here. We're dealing with it. Yeah, guys. Have a great week, and that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.